Hello and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast on this very special episode, our 100th episode. I'm Zoe Hawkins and I'm here with my friend and co-host Jo Wheatley.
Yeah, here we are, 100 episodes in. It's kind of that realization that when you start something, or when we start something, you kind of have visions of how long you'll do it for. But this podcast is kind of never ending in our minds. And here we are at episode 100 already. And I've got such fond memories of launching the podcast. It felt like such a huge thing for us to do. And now here we are 100 episodes in. So today's episode is all about us sharing with you what our highlights have been from those 100 episodes. And they include contributions from all of you as well as our listeners. So I hope you enjoy, tuning in today.
Yeah, as you said, Jo, when we first started out, I know you said you have a vision, but I think at that time I really didn't have a vision. Like there's so much about podcasting that I didn't know. I knew we'd enjoy having the conversations. I had no idea what was going to happen with this podcast. And I think it's fair to say it has surpassed my expectations well beyond what I thought was possible. And that is obviously thanks to our listeners, and the experience that they have created for us in this podcasting as well. So where shall we begin in sharing the highlights from the past 100?
Well, let's start with the listeners. So let's start with what the stats that we get behind the scenes tell us have been your favorite episodes as the listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a long rundown. So the first episode that ranked as your favorite session was episode 15, which is Great Coaching Questions. And I remember recording that fairly early on and we were sharing some of our favorite coaching questions. So that one is ranking up there. Then we've got episode 19, which is the power of observation in coaching, with us sharing our thoughts and experiences around what observation is and why it's so powerful. We've got goal setting in coaching, which is episode 27, which is quite a classic episode. We've got episode 31, which is common coaching scenarios. And I remember us recording that one. And I think that was inspired by, we were doing a lot of coaching at the time and we'd had all these different scenarios popping up and we thought, that would be useful to share. And turns out that it was. So that's an episode that you all enjoyed. Episode 36 was coaching confidence. And when we recorded this one, I think we knew this one was going to be a popular one because you and I have a different perspective on what confidence is and how to approach that in coaching. And that is an episode that gets referenced time and time again in our coaching training and from our listeners. People tell us, I listened to your episode on coaching confidence and it really changed the way that I approached my coaching session. So we know that one is a good one. So there's a few more. So we had episode 45, a typical coaching journey, us sharing what coaching actually looks like, because when you begin coaching, you don't know, do you? Like when you're thinking of training to be a coach. 48, building your confidence as a coach, recognizing we are not born as confident coaches. And that is a journey that we go on. So we shared our reflections on that, leading to episode 52, which is how do you reflect effectively as a coach? And we talk about reflective practice as like the unsung hero of coaching. So we're really thrilled that that is ranked as a popular episode because it shows us as listeners how committed you are to your coaching practice and being the best that you can be, whether you are as a leader or a coach already. Episode 57 was NLP coaching activity demos. That's where we walked through and demonstrated a coaching activity. We used to do a lot of these on our YouTube channel, didn't we? Like we did a lot of coaching demos, always super popular. So we wanted to bring that into the podcast. Nearly there, 3 more to go. Episode 71, coaching imposter syndrome. So which again, we aren't surprised is popular because we know that is a challenge that many clients bring to coaching. And again, we have a different angle on how we approach that with our clients. Episode 75, how to build rapport. And the latest one, episode 79, is what to do after your apprenticeship. And there are other ones. We haven't got the stats yet for the months. We actually batch these podcasts. We're recording here in June. You're listening in July. So we're waiting for our stats now from the last month. So that is what you have told us are your favorite coaching episodes.
And that's one of my highlights of the podcast, which is, we go out to the coaching crowd, which is our Facebook community, but also on our other platforms. And we're always asking you, when we're coming up to batching, because we would tend to record somewhere between 4 and 6 episodes at a time. We used to change our clothes so that we look different in the episodes when they go on YouTube. We don't bother with that anymore. But we ask you, and so we love getting the suggestions because it makes our life easier, because we know that we are recording content that may be of interest to you. And as you'll know from other episodes, when we are coaching our clients ourselves, or we're facilitating coaching supervision for coaches, we're always looking for themes, real issues that or people thinking about training to be coaches are asking. And so obviously that list was a random list of your favorite episodes. There wasn't really a theme above them, and that really replicates our approach to the podcast, which is a bit random. It started off with the first 10 episodes really focused on those of you that are deciding whether or not to train to be a coach, because as you know, we are co-founders of In Good Company, which is a global accredited coaching organization. But that's followed on by us going off on different branches, to really meet you as the listeners where you're at and the topics that you want us to discuss. And so one of the highlights has been when we receive reviews, because it does take a lot of energy and effort to record the podcast in amongst a busy coaching business. But if I just look down the list of the reviews that we've received recently, we've got one here from Source of Sunshine. I love this podcast. I'm an aspiring coach and find it's very confusing to find the right training pathway. This podcast is such a great resource and a guide for people like me. I'm learning an awful lot just from listening to the podcast. And most importantly, I now have such passion for coaching and more determination to start my side coaching business. And then one from the Word Witch. The Coaching Crowd podcast was a series I stumbled across when studying for my level 7 practitioner diploma in executive coaching. I was hooked after one episode and quickly returned to the very beginning of the series to absorb all of the content that Joe and Zoe were sharing. Every episode offered relevant and pertinent information, experience, and advice, all of which align perfectly to the ethical standards set so stringently by the recognized coaching accrediting bodies. This series provided a powerful scaffolding within which I could grow alongside the content of my course. Each episode offered a different angle, but all were relevant to the material we covered during our learning, and in many cases provided a deeper contextual layer with which to connect. And it goes on. Oh, wait. Thank you, Word Witch. And then Joanna, I've been a listener since this podcast launched. I have to get my Monday morning fix. As you probably all know, we release it first thing on a Monday morning, and we do get loads of messages or people just saying to us like, oh, you're with me every Monday morning in the car or on the run, walking the dog. And we still pinch me like, really? Are we there? I listen to other podcasts, but this is the best for a number of reasons. Firstly, each episode is a bite-sized selection of their knowledge and experience that they share with warmth and humor. No judgment. Everyone at every level is made to feel welcome. Oh, that's really lovely to hear. Secondly, I can use episodes as a refresher for me when preparing for a client session. I particularly love the episode about confidence, as this is a common coaching thread. And finally, the podcast topics come from the community of coaches that Joe and Zoe support, making them hot topics that resonate every week. This is a must listen for anyone who is a coach, has responsibility for employees, or is thinking of becoming a coach. It is addictive though, so clear your diary. And yeah, and so it goes on. Like, that means so much to us. And as this is our 100th episode, if you're listening and you haven't yet reviewed our podcast, it would be such a gift to us if you could take just a few minutes to add a review for us. Doesn't need to be that long, but just to share your experience of the podcast, it would be amazing for us to be able to see some more reviews added into the podcast.
Yeah, you can do that on Apple. I don't think you can actually do that on the other platforms yet. Maybe Spotify recently introduced it, but if you can't, please rate, please subscribe. That those all make a real difference to us. What I love about this podcast is that it's become such a contribution to the coaching industry. It's not what we anticipated when we set out, because we didn't recognize the size of the audience that this would create. But we'd recently gone for our master practitioner accreditations, I think maybe the year before we launched this podcast. And our contribution to the coaching industry was around our YouTube resources and starting to develop a community. And we were really passionate about contributing to this profession. It is something that we believe is really important as coaches, to be able to hold the standards of the profession, raise the standards of the profession. And we get emails from other coaching training providers who use our podcast to support their learners in their learning journey, which for me really epitomizes like the coaching industry, that it's not about competition. It's not about who is better than who. It's just about how do we all contribute to this profession and raise the standards of the profession. And I think every single one of you that listen enable us to do that by this podcast becoming a platform for ethical coaching. And we love that you guys enjoy, what we share. And what we share is inspired also by all of you and the questions that you ask and the curiosity you bring to our communities and challenging. We don't have all the answers, but we are happy to have the conversations and stimulate some thinking around it. So that for me has been a real joy in watching how the podcast has grown to be able to have the impact that it does have within the coaching profession.
I think what I also love is that pretty much everybody that comes and joins our coaching qualifications, and we have somewhere between 5 and 8 cohorts a year, is that they've all listened to the podcast. So there's a familiarity that our learners have with us before they join the program. And I think that really helps people to be able to decide with confidence, because often when you choose a course like or a CPD thing, you're looking at a web page, you might have a conversation with somebody, but you're pressing buy now and that's it, and you're just crossing your fingers and hoping that it's all going to turn out well, and you don't necessarily like have a relationship. And so I love that the podcast enables people to build a relationship with us ahead of time and give people the confidence, that they can do it and that they've got qualities that are going to help them, and that actually they already have a sense of belonging, and a familiarity to us. And whilst you and I are stepping back from the facilitation of some of the qualifications, we obviously deliver the emotions coaching training. So I know a lot of you are like, how can I work with you? Can I do this? Can I do that? That really is the main way to engage with us at the moment. As you know, it was created by us deconstructing what was in our heads, which is what we do in these podcasts as well. But in this area, particularly around emotions coaching. So it's all brand new things. And as you say, Zoe, when we get emails like unprompted, but that just are referencing the podcast and enabling people to feel that we are accessible, because we've always been driven by a desire for coaching to be as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. And for us, the podcast has really, really felt like we've honored that part of us. And the conversations are never scripted, as we've told you many times before. Sometimes that's a bonus, maybe other times not so much. But I love the fact that you all get to join us having an authentic conversation. And sometimes in the moment, what comes out in the conversation between us is it's interesting for Zoe and I as well, because we're developing our thinking in the moment, or we're reconnecting with things that maybe we have kind of faded into the background for us. So it's useful for us too as coach practitioners.
Well, that's the thing, like it's there's nothing pretend about our relationship or about this podcast. Like what you see is literally what you get. These are conversations that we have as replicas when we're not recording. Joe and I do spend hours and hours like talking about our business, growing the business, coaching industry, CPD courses we want to attend, different things that have happened in that we're taking to supervision. Joe is still my support and I am still her support when we have coaching sessions that we want to debrief on anonymously, of course. So this is just a real extension of who we are, our lives, our business, and it's great that you guys can see that and that you experience that as well.
We of course do have those things. What else have we got to talk about? I'm sure we've talked about this before, or somebody will suggest a topic to us and we have to really just stop and say, right, this person would like us to talk about this, and we're like, what? We ask each other, what have we got to say about this? And you know, sometimes it takes a little while for us to, you know, but then we always fire off each other. And we get a lot of feedback that you enjoy the interactions, of the fact that it is the two of us. You're kind of getting to, you know, put a glass against the wall and listen into our conversations. So really,
well, we did sorry, Joe, we did try guest sessions, didn't we?
Yes,
About halfway through the podcast, we were like, oh, well, I bet our community would love to hear from people who've been on the journey. Like, let's bring some of them on. Tanked the ratings. I completely tanked the ratings. Wasn't what you guys wanted at all from what we saw in the data. And that was interesting for us as a learning journey, wasn't it? In, you know, in that you want it, seemingly you want to hear from us and you want to hear our conversations. And I think the conversations from our learners are really important. But to this day, we get loads of requests in our inbox around, oh, we'd really love to present this guest for you to come on our podcast. And up till now, we haven't, simply because that experiment for us didn't work. And we heard the message that, no, actually, we're interested in the conversations that you have. Whether that will change in the future when we start to invite guests on, who knows? But right now, the format that we have works for us. It seems to work for you. And we're still enjoying it. I think that's the really refreshing thing, that 100 episodes in, we still enjoy batching these podcasts, recording these podcasts, bringing the conversations to life. It's a highlight in our month.
What we don't enjoy is wearing these heavy headphones. Let's be honest. We record the episodes and we're like, oh, can we take these headphones off? And sitting behind this humongous microphone that is nearly the same size as our head, it's not something that we enjoy. But we really enjoy the conversations and we enjoy the feedback. And I think also a big thank you, because we launched the podcast before our book. So it was a huge year for us. You know, year before last, when we launched it in that year. And I think launching the podcast and the support that we got from our communities to launch the podcast, as scary as that was, really then as scary as it was to launch our book, made it easier, because we'd had some experience of launching something big out into the world. So love that we have the book there available for you as well, Deciding to Coach, which is all about the coaching mindset and the business strategy to create a successful and sustainable coaching business. Because as we all know, you can be an amazing coach, but if you're wanting to do that as your own business, that also does involve a different skill set, which we recognize. And again, the feedback from the book complementing the podcast, because often people find one through the other pathway, seems to have worked really well for you as the listeners and in our community.
I was chatting to somebody just this week who has an established business and is looking at launching a podcast, and we started digressing, and he was sharing that it felt quite intimidating, podcasting, that there's lots of big names in the charts, referring to one of us as the big names, which is still to this day surprising for me. And I remember I remember before we launched the podcast, looking in the charts, and at this point in time, a few years before we'd launched it, I'd binged Amy Porterfield's podcast. I think she must have had about 250 episodes at that point. And I listened to every single one when I was stepping into this online business space. And I did one of her programs. And I just remember when we were launching a podcast thinking, well, never going to be, in the charts like her. And when we launched, we're like above her in the charts and consistently next door to her and other names and other podcasts that I listen to. And I think what I want to offer to all of you that are listening is everything is possible. Like, there is an algorithm that works in very strange ways. It's not all about the size of your audience. It's not all about how many listeners you get. Like, there's so much that goes into it, but just do the thing. Like, if a podcast is on your plan and on your radar, the best thing we did was work with consultancy agencies. We used Anna Parker Naples to support us with our podcast. She was brilliant. She walked us through it step by step. It was an investment, but it has paid for itself so many times over. We're really grateful for the support that we had in doing the podcast the way that we have to position it up for success. And so if it's something that is on your radar, don't look in the charts and be intimidated by all the things that you think you see. Focus and stay in your own lane. Focus on the quality of the conversations you want to bring to life. What is it that you have and want to say? What is it that you want to share with the world? And you'll do well. You'll do well too.
I think what we do is kind of normalize, coaching and demystify it. That's what we're driven to do, is to, as we said earlier, to make it feel accessible and seem accessible. We are coaches like all of you, listening, and we're people interested in coaching and thinking about training to be a coach. Anybody, can achieve that. But I think for us to see that we have consistently stayed in the top 10 in that business chart in the UK, and have rated highly in other charts around the world as well, it's that there seems to be something that's bringing you back to listening to us, and that's what keeps us going. And so as long as people are interested, we will keep going. And next stop, I guess, is 150 episodes or 200 or 500. Who knows? We'll have a few more lines by the time we get to that stage.
We'll have to come up for air around 150, I think.
Yeah. So really, I hope you've enjoyed having a little wander through, the highlights. Maybe that we've mentioned some episodes today that other listeners have found really useful. Maybe you've missed it somewhere. Maybe you joined us at a later stage, and perhaps it's been a reminder to go back and check some other episodes out. Or perhaps you resonate with, oh yes, that was my favorite episode as well. Maybe you are one of the reviewers that I read out earlier. But yeah, if you haven't rated, reviewed, or subscribed to the podcast yet, we would love that as a gift for our 100th episode, to help us celebrate all that this podcast is and all that it can be.
Well, I remember on launch day, I fell asleep on your sofa at 4:00, having had a glass of champagne. So, wherever you are listening to this, I'll probably repeat that process at some point in the evening. I'll raise a glass to our 100th episode and then promptly close my eyes and lay back and enjoy the snooze. So yeah, please, we would love to hear from you. And thank you for being here, either for the last few episodes or all 100. We do appreciate you.
See you next time.